Hey everybody, it's Dr. William Clark here for Leadership Conversations. This is the show where we talk about leadership according to the world that matters to you. I'm happy to be with you this morning, and I wanted to share with you a couple of concepts from my book, Sustainable, Developing a Sustainable Faith-Based and Nonprofit Organization. Now, I wrote this book back in 2015 to help nonprofits and faith-based organizations figure out how to continue with the services that they provide and to ensure that they're able to pay their bills, keep their doors open, and benefit the clients that desperately need and use their services the most. Faith-based institutions and nonprofit institutions are vital resources in our communities, and if they were to close their doors, or if they were to lose funding, or if they were to just no longer operate, we would struggle as a community. And quite frankly, we don't need that struggle. We have enough struggles going on in our community, and we need as many nonprofits serving the people as much as we can. Now, in the book, I don't give specific strategies about what a nonprofit should do to raise money, all other than grant writing and so forth. I really talk about the principles and the culture around becoming sustainable. There are strategies that you can look up specifically for your nonprofit, and I'm not talking about bake sales and car washes and chicken dinners. I'm talking about real live earned income opportunities that can substantially change your nonprofit. Now, let me just share a couple of concepts from a presentation that I recently gave, and then I'll talk a little bit more about some of the concepts that I've shared with a couple of folks. Now, the nonprofit landscape, no matter where you live, no matter where you're from around the country or around the world, the nonprofit landscape is crowded. And that means that you have a lot of nonprofits and a lot of churches in your city or in your town or in your state. In some cities, you can walk outside and you can see a church on every corner. And that is the norm for that particular city or community. I know where I grew up in Philadelphia, there were churches on every corner, and there still are. Where I live now in the greater Hartford area, there are churches almost on every corner. Sometimes there are traditional church buildings and churches that are meeting in facilities that are not so traditional, but the concept is still the same. And beyond faith-based institutions, there are nonprofit organizations that are popping up on a regular basis, both legitimate and those that are just starting out. When I talk about legitimate nonprofits, I'm talking about nonprofits that are already have their tax-exempt status and are generating some sort of revenue from some sort of line item that they've created. And then there are nonprofits that have been recently created. They have their EIN number, but they may not necessarily have a tax-exempt status from the IRS. And they're just in a startup phase. Regardless of where an organization sits on that spectrum, the truth is, and it's true wherever you are, as I said, that the nonprofit landscape is crowded. With that comes another truth. The more nonprofits that are entering the space, and the more churches that are entering the space where you live and where you work and where you worship, that automatically begins to shrink the sandbox of resources. So if there are $100 that's available, and you have 5 nonprofits, you can reasonably divide that $100 and say each of you get $20. But when you start to say there's $100 and there are 100 nonprofits, that 20 becomes $1, right? On average, if you average it out that way. Ideally, in a competitive environment, in a competitive market, there are some organizations that are continuing to get that $20 hit or even more, while others are getting less than $1. Some may be getting a penny or 5 cents or 10 cents or 25 cents of that $100 bill. Small numbers, simple numbers, but you get the concept, right? So there are going to be big players and small players, but here is the truth that you got to wrestle with as you launch your nonprofit, or as you develop your nonprofit, or as you mature your nonprofit. The market space is crowded, and therefore shrinking resources becomes more of a reality. This becomes even more heightened as organizations, as funders, as state entities, as federal dollars become more scarce, because they want to see results, they want to see impact, or there may be lower revenue than expected in your specific city or state and in our country. And that means that there are fewer dollars that can be given out. Now, the question that you have to wrestle with as well, if in fact you believe that this sandbox is shrinking, is how does your organization, how does your church, your nonprofit stand out from the pack? How do you get the attention of people who have resources? Now, let's go to the church realm for a moment. The more churches you see in a corner, ideally, you should be thinking more churches, more people saved or coming to Jesus, right? The reality is, that's not happening, right? There aren't enough people coming to Jesus to justify the number of churches that are popping up everywhere. Not enough churches are actually doing what we call church planting. Church planting is the concept of planting and establishing a church with the idea of reaching an unsaved or untapped potential, untapped population. All right. If a church is in fact doing that, then that means that there is an opportunity to grow a church that's organic, that's from the ground up, that won't tap into or bother other congregations. But what we typically see, and this is not a judgment on any church or any pastor, but what we typically see is with new churches that are popping up, people are either splitting churches. Hallelujah. People are splitting churches, or they are robbing other churches of their membership. Okay, so you see a new church pop up and you see the numbers grow there, but numbers go down in another church. You see a lot of that. You really don't see enough of churches started from the ground up, reaching out into the community and grabbing people who have never been churched, who have been disillusioned with church, and who will create fresh membership numbers. Now, I share that example because there's a spiritual standpoint to all this, but there's the business element, which is what I write about. And that is when you have people in your church, they are your donors. They are the ones who are giving resources to support your organization, faith-based or not. And if there are more churches popping up, then that means because of the lack of growth in church numbers, authentic church numbers, or lack of growth in authentic new believers or new disciples, that means that your organization, you are fighting for precious dollars to pay the bills. So when your church doesn't have enough money to pay the bills, this is where we see the church bust out the chicken dinners or the fish dinners. You don't have enough money to fix the roof, so now you're selling fish dinners, right? Fish sandwiches. You don't have enough money to fix the boiler, so now we're doing a car wash. You don't have enough money to install new lighting, right? So now you're selling cupcakes and you're doing bake sales and all those things. Listen, this is not a criticism, but this is an evaluation of reality. Because of lack of growth in your nonprofit or in your church, you are forced to do things that really don't yield significant results. So that kind of forces us to wrestle with the reality. And let me just close this kind of loop here. In order to move forward, you have to adjust to the new climate. You have to be responsive to the reality that you are fighting for numbers, or you're going to have to create a blue ocean. Now, that's one of my favorite books, The Blue Ocean. The Blue Ocean espouses the concept that if you're going to survive and thrive as a business, as an organization, as a person, you cannot swim where the sharks are. Where you see red in the water, that means there's blood in the water. And if you see blood in the water, that means there's sharks in the water. And if you see sharks in the water, that means that you as a little guppy cannot compete with the sharks. So in order to survive, you go where there's blue water or a blue ocean. That means when you see blue, there's no blood. And where there's no blood, there's no sharks. And when you see no sharks, then you have a fighting chance to survive or create the territory with which you can dominate. That goes for churches, that goes for nonprofits, just as well as it goes for for-profit businesses. This truth must be wrestled with and embraced by you as a nonprofit. Now, there are a bunch of statistics I could share, but I don't want to share because you should be getting my book, Sustainable, How to Create a Sustainable Nonprofit and Faith-Based Organization. By the way, visit www.williampclark.com to get your copy, and you get all the results there that I share. But the reality is true. Okay, and there are statistics that back up that truth. You need to become sustainable so that you can keep your doors open, so that you can support your clients, so that you can have a solid infrastructure that can benefit many, many people who rely upon you. You didn't create that nonprofit. You didn't create that church just to sit around and do nothing. You created those institutions to serve a greater purpose and to serve a need. Now, if you are unable to pay your bills, keep your doors open, keep your lights on, keep the gas going, keep the water going, and pay relevant staff, then you cannot fulfill your purpose. You didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to create this. No, there is a purpose. There's a destiny, there is a reason for your nonprofit and for your faith-based institution. If you want it to survive, you must become sustainable. Now, I will give you a high-level view of the sustainable formula and a sustainable model that I portray in the book, and that it comes down to three key categories. Number one, in order to become sustainable, you got to have sound leadership. If you are watching this podcast and you are the leader of a faith-based institution or of a nonprofit, you must provide sound leadership. You must have wisdom, you must have skill, you must have knowledge. And listen, I just wrapped up recording a grant writing course, and it talks about the culture of development and resource development. And when it comes out, I'm encouraging you to get that resource because it will impact the way you raise money. And I talk a little bit about grants in the book, but listen, I'm telling you, in order for you to get your organization to the phase that you need it to be at, you need to provide sound leadership. In the book, I talk about several leadership tactics, but one of my favorite is self-leadership. And if you want my perspective on self-leadership, you got to get the book, read the book, because I talk about this and I live by self-leadership. When I think back, just to kind of digress for a moment, when I think back on my childhood and I think back the way my father raised me, and when I would get in trouble, my dad would say, "What happened?" Right? And so, like any kid, I'll tell him what happened. But typically, my kind of sharing of the story was based upon what other people did. And my dad used to always say, "Yeah, okay, great, but what did you do?" And I would start the story all over again, and he would say, "Nope, what did you do?" And he kept saying it over and over and over again. And as I grew up, he kept telling me the biggest person you're going to have a challenge with is yourself. Now, fast forward years later, getting a doctorate degree, one of my most favorite and intimately held theories of leadership is self-leadership, which ultimately speaks back to my father and the way he raised me. And he's right. The biggest challenge you're going to have in building your church, building your nonprofit, building your relationships, building friendships, building anything or creating anything is you. And I talk about self-leadership in detail in this book. I'm telling you, you need to read the book, and I'm telling you, you need to master self-leadership. Here's the second piece of the formula when it comes to becoming sustainable. You got to be innovative. On a daily basis, I go to work. I turn on the key, turn on my car, go to work, and go to meetings with the intention of being innovative and creative. When you're innovative, you are making a decision to be intentionally disruptive to the status quo. Even if you created the status quo, that's the only way you're going to be able to realize change. That's the only way you're going to be able to realize the blue ocean. That's the only way you're going to be able to realize sustainability. You must innovate. I have run into a number of people who would tell me, I got a nonprofit. They don't have a 501c3. Okay, so you got a nonprofit without a 501c3. Great. How do you generate revenue? Man, we do bake sales. We do car washes. That is not going to do anything for anybody. That is not going to serve the community that you have designated to serve. That is not going to pay your salary. That's not going to buy supplies. Ultimately, I have seen organizations who said that we're selling chicken dinners, right? They sell chicken dinners. They generate a certain amount of profit. But then when you ask the question, how much did you really make? They say, well, we made XYZ. Then I said, well, after you deduct all expenses paid, labor, how much did you really make? And the look on their face says it all. This is why, as a nonprofit organization, you cannot rely upon grants. You can't rely upon cupcake sales, fish dinners, chicken dinners, car washes, etc. You have to rely upon multiple streams of income to make a difference in your organization. And this leads me to the third part of the formula, and that is you must develop and identify renewable revenue resources. Look, as a nonprofit, you have the right and ability to go after grants, and I'm telling you, you probably should. I go after them all the time, and it's something that you must have as a part of your portfolio, your revenue portfolio. But then you have to find renewable revenue sources, and that can show up in multiple ways. In the book, I talk about earned income. As a nonprofit, you must figure out how to earn income. You got to make money somehow by selling something that is worth something of value, that has a significant profit margin, and that can add money to your bottom line. That's the formula. Okay, you have to learn how to generate revenue. Now, I talk about some additional concepts. I even talk about some biblical concepts in the book to further explain what I am sharing. I have helped nonprofits generate revenue, but there's no one size fits all. I've had people ask me, give me some ideas, and I give them none. and I give them none because I don't know their organization. Here's a tidbit for you that I talk about in the book. In order for you to generate earned income, you must identify your core competency. Your core competency tells the story, and that story is attractive to someone who's willing to pay for it. Whether it's a funder through a grant, whether it's a contract through a municipal institution or not, or other, or it's someone on the open market who's willing to pay X number of dollars for that core competency. Without the core competency, you have absolutely nothing. There's no advice I can give you. There's no standard template I can give you. There's none of that. There are concepts that I've worked on for nonprofits and organizations, and I have helped them generate millions of dollars. But if I was to give you those concepts, it won't help you at all. For instance, if your nonprofit works with youth and you say, I want to earn money by opening up a barbershop. All right, great, cool. Who on staff has a barber's license? Who on staff is a master barber or a master stylist? Who has went to school for barbering and hairstyling or anything related to that? Who has ran a business, period? Who has started a business? Who's launched a business? Who has survived downturns of business? Who knows how much to charge? Who knows how to hire barbers? Who knows how to rent out booths if that's going to be the strategy? Do you have administrative staff to collect the payment from other barbers and from customers? Where do you place the barbershop? How much you pay in rent? How much is too much? How much is too low? Where's the right community? Who's your target audience? What hair texture do you specialize in? Now, I'm not a barber, but I'm fascinated with that business. But these are things off the top of my head I'm sharing with you, because if you're doing youth development and you want to start a barbershop, but you have nobody who knows anything about the barbering business or who's never worked in it, you are bound to mess up and make a mistake. Now, there are some cases where nonprofits start businesses they know nothing about and find viral success. Please hear me. Viral success is not a measure of real success for your organization. You have to be real about this thing. You need to find out your core competency, work that core competency, figure out how you use that core competency, and figure out how you can monetize that core competency. A couple of weeks ago, I did a recording with Dr. Philip Foster talking about monetizing your passion. We started to lay the groundwork of that conversation of how do you identify what you're good at and how do you monetize it. It's not just for the for-profit world, it's for the nonprofit world as well, and it's for the faith-based world as well. How do you monetize your core competency? And then here's the last tidbit of all of that. Who's going to lead the effort? And you may say, I'm the executive director, I'm the CEO, I'm the executive of this nonprofit. Great, but are you the right person to lead this effort to generate earned income? You probably should be the right person, but if you're not, and if you have somebody else on staff who's much, much, much better, you need to release that person to do what they do so that you can generate earned income to sustain your nonprofit or your faith-based organization. I'm sorry for the extra long podcast this morning, but I really wanted to share that concept with you. I hope that is helpful. I hope that you find good use for it. Listen, check out my resources. Go to www.williampclark.com. Check out the resources that we have there. Check out the books we have there. Find me on social media at Dr. William P. Clark and just have a conversation with me. I can talk about this topic all day long. Lord knows I talk my staff to death about this topic, but I love it and I think it's essential. And being in this business, being in the marketplace of nonprofits and in the faith-based marketplace, if you will, I care deeply about both. I'm involved in both, and I want both to survive well beyond me. And I'm going to do my part to ensure that I share good information with you leaders out there who are leading churches, who are leading ministries, who are leading nonprofits, who are leading efforts. But you need to figure out how to sustain those efforts beyond traditional revenue sources. This is Dr. William Clark here for Leadership Conversations, and we'll see you in the next show. Peace.